So as Kelly mentioned, my name is Sophia Eccleston. I'm chair of the Florida Commission on the Status of Women, and that is my volunteer job. But in my real job, I am the Senior External Affairs Manager for Florida Power and Light in Palm Beach County. In 2018, I was appointed to the commission by CFO Jimmy Petronas, and it's been an honor to serve with 21 other women from across the state. So as chair in 2022, I was elected to be chair of the commission. And as chair, there were two main goals that I wanted to make sure we accomplished. And one of them was to collaborate more with our local commissions. And you know, yesterday we had the privilege of having the Jacksonville Mayor's Commission come and speak to us. But those are the type of things that we like to do. So if you're with a local commission, you know, please reach out to the commission office and get with us so that, you know, you can join us at our quarterly meetings or, you know, even our executive monthly meetings. And, you know, we can get you to share with us what you are doing in your local commissions. And so the other key goal for me for this year was also to find out some of the issues affecting women and girls throughout the state. We've been very focused on what I like to call the more mature women, but we haven't really tapped into the 18 to 25-year-olds to find out what are some of the things affecting them. So we hired a researcher firm who is helping us, and hopefully some of you in this room have seen those surveys, but we sent out a survey to really gather that information, and we should have the results of that sometime in October, and we will definitely love to share it with some of our local commissions. But one of the things that we'll do is make sure it's in our annual report that we will share with the legislators. Because one of our goals is to make sure that when we find these issues, and this is what we're charged with as the commission, is to really find out the issues affecting women and girls, in addition to celebrating them and all their successes, but also bring those issues to the legislators so that they hopefully will enact laws that are help to solve some of those issues. So we're really looking forward to seeing what some of, you know, that data that we're gonna be gathering is gonna do, and hopefully, you know, as a commission and working collaboratively with other commissions, we can really make a difference for women and girls in the state of Florida. So those are kind of the two goals that, you know, main goals that we're working on. And of course, you know, we love to celebrate and bring really good programming to the, you know, to our, to the women and girls throughout the state of Florida, and some men. So, you know, I wanna just thank you all for being here. I wanna just thank you all for being here. You know, no matter where you came from, to join us, you know, this is a great event. This has always been a good event. When we do it in Tallahassee, we always like to have, you know, take the women to the Capitol so that they can learn the legislative process. But I think you will walk away from this feeling very enlightened, and we have amazing speakers that you will learn from today. So thank you again. And with that, I'll turn it over to the chair of the Public Policy Committee, Commissioner Barreto.
Not like you can't see me with this blue jacket on, but I thought I'd come up here. Good morning, everybody. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us here today. We are very proud to put on this LEAD Summit here in the beautiful city of Jacksonville, and are overwhelmed at the response that we got, so thank you so much for being here. The Florida Commission on the Status of Women was created by the Florida legislature, and our job is to research and identify issues affecting women, girls, and ultimately families so that we can put together data, share it with elected officials, share it with leaders around the state, both in the public and private sector, so they can affect positive change. As Commissioner Ecclestone said, we are nonpartisan. However, our job is to really bring forth that data. There are very many women throughout the years who've served on the commission, and sometimes men, and they've worked very, very hard each year, volunteering their time. We're not paid in this position, but we all have a passion for making a difference. We've come a long way from women's suffrage, and we celebrated that a year or two ago now. However, we have still a long way to go. We, in 2020, had a wide variety of women running for office, most women elected in any year ever during that election time. There are still gains to be made. Women make up over 30.3% of all statewide elected, statewide, and 35% of the Florida legislature. However, we're half of the population. So again, work to go. That is why we're here today, to inform, inspire, and continue to engage in a dialogue and to help you help us bring forth the voice of women's issues. Events like this don't happen overnight. The commission is working very, very hard. The whole commission really has had input. However, the Public Policy Committee has worked very hard, and I'd like to recognize the commissioners who are here today. Many are very, very busy and couldn't be with us. The commission is extremely diverse. We have entrepreneurs, we have elected officials, we have utility workers, we have a whole range of people, which really makes up a beautiful kaleidoscope of voices that help us impart a different kind of viewpoint to the challenges we face. But let me ask you to rise if you're here in the room, the commissioners who worked on this. Commissioner Melanie Bonanno, Commissioner Lori Day, Senator and Commissioner Gail Harrell, Commissioner Belinda Kaiser, Commissioner Tracy Merlin, Commissioner Roxy Nelson, State Representative and Commissioner Jenna Persons-Maluka, and of course our Chair, Commissioner Eccleston. If you'll please stand and be recognized, and thank you for your dedication and hard work. So, you're here to hear this incredible panel, and so we want to get to that right now. As we introduce our speaker, please note that we're not going to read about the incredibly talented biographies. Once again, as Kelly said up front, they're right on the app that you have been provided, as well as the agenda details are on there. So, I have had the pleasure of meeting our facilitator for this session, from Ohio, originally, loves horses, very active in the Jacksonville community, Mary Baer. I'm sure many of you know her. Mary has been very successful and accomplished in her career. She's a co-author, reporter. She delivers the news each weeknight on News 4 Jax. How many of you listen to her? Raise your hands. All right. Please join me in giving a warm round of applause to a high-profile, excellent, exceptional woman right here in Jacksonville, and one who volunteered her time to be with us again today. So thank you so much, Mary.
What an introduction. Rita, thank you so much. Well, yes, we do have a wonderful panel. I think we should go ahead and let me talk real briefly about Title IX, before the experts begin. It marks the 50th anniversary of the passage of Title IX, the law that requires all federally funded educational institutions to prohibit discrimination based on sex. It opened a new world of opportunity for the generations of women since its passage, inspiring a movement for equal opportunity in classrooms, in playing fields, and of course in boardrooms. So, thank you all for being here, and we're going to pay tribute to the impact of Title IX and reflect on 50 years of progress while also acknowledging the current challenges and the potential for the next 50 years. This is a panel discussion, talk show style. We have audience Q&A. You're going to be able to give us your questions at the end. Along with our live audience, we also have a virtual audience streaming right now as well. So welcome to all of you. And now to our panelists. Can I call up Nancy Hogshead-Makar? Nancy, many refer to as the guru of Title IX. This world-class gold medal Olympic swimmer is known as a lifelong advocate for access and equality in athletics. She speaks internationally on the subject of Title IX and countless other titles. But in my home, she's actually considered a star because she and her husband set me up with my husband, Marty. So I'm kind of indebted to her for life. Thank you. Okay, Barbara Jo Palmer, she's actually joining us via Zoom, correct? Right? Is she going to join? In a moment. She'll be on the screen in just a moment, but Barbara became Florida State University's Director of Women's Intercollegiate Athletics in 1977, and she was chosen for the Florida Women's Hall of Fame because of her lobbying work for Title IX. So truly a trailblazer here. Can't wait to hear the stories about how it all came about. She's going to tell us about the history. And I just met Marlon Jones and her beautiful daughter, Trinity. Marlon, come on up. Everybody welcome Marlon Jones, Esquire. Marlon currently serves at the University of North Florida as the Director of Equal Opportunity and Inclusion and the Title IX Coordinator. She's an advocate for diversity and inclusion and teaches in the sports management program here at UNF. So she sees the effects of the law firsthand. I can't wait to hear your discussion as well, Marlon. And I'm going to go ahead and can I go sit? Should I go sit down? Would you like Kelly me to sit down with it? Yeah, I think so too. We've got room. All right, I'm sitting in the middle here, and I guess I can use this mic. Hey, you got two. Wouldn't you know that Nancy steals the other one? Oh, and if you have any questions as we begin our discussion, as we go through the discussion, jot them down. There are cards on the table. Is that right, Rita? Okay, and then we'll be gathering those cards up, so at the end you guys can ask some questions. So please, this is your chance. This is your chance. So good morning. Thank you so much for being here, Marlon. Nancy, let's begin with Nancy. If you could, she'll be the backgrounder, right, of the whole Title IX process. If you could tell us how we got here, maybe break down the law for us first. And I know, okay, easy peasy, she says. Let's put this up closer to your mouth. There you go. Almost. Can we see those?
As part of the big omnibus civil rights package, Congress passes Title VI, which bars discrimination for anybody going to school based on race, color, national origin, if the school receives federal funds. So it was a quid pro quo, right? It was a way to get private schools that were getting all our tax dollars to also integrate. Okay, so that was 64. It took until 1972 until women got the exact same thing. So if you look at the statute, can you go to slide number, I think it's number 4? Is it possible? You don't have it? Okay, you'll have to take my word for it. So Title VI and Title IX are identical, except Title VI, passed in 1964, says race, color, national origin, and Title IX says sex. So no discrimination based on sex. So it's a quid pro quo. It's a way of the government saying, if we give you money, you agree not to discriminate, okay? Now there are lots of ways to discriminate, and her office has to handle all of them, right? You can sexually harass somebody, there can be sexual violence, you can tell somebody that they have to carry a child, like a lot of coaches were doing, or alternatively, you have to have an abortion. So there's pregnancy discrimination. There's, you'll all know what I'm, right? Lots of different ways. Athletics, we worked so hard to make sure that we actually had what 1954 prohibited, which is we wanted sex segregation in athletics. We wanted separate but equal. It's one of the few places in the whole athletic department where we do sex segregate, right? The math program doesn't, the rest of the school is integrated in not just race and sex, but also religion and everything else, right? It's all integrated.
And as an athlete, you know this firsthand, why we want them separated.
Right. Yeah, there's no other category of, so we have lots of categories in sports, right? We've got age categories, we've got weight categories, all different kinds of geography and how good somebody is. There's no bigger gap in the categories than the sex categories, right? So Michael Phelps at his best was only 0.2% better than his competitors, whereas the best men are are literally 100-fold more than that, which is about between 10 and 50% better than women, right? So there's a huge gap between them. And if half the population is going to get equal opportunities in sports, we've got to have our own team. If a school, imagine UNF just going and saying, hey, we're going to have one team, and we're just going to have a basketball team and just see who makes it. We're going to integrate it. You wouldn't know who I was. You wouldn't know who most women athletes are. You wouldn't know who Katie Ledecky was. You wouldn't know who Allison Felix is. You wouldn't know who Serena Williams is, right? We have to have that sex segregation in order to have equal opportunities. Right?
Even though there are plenty of women who can totally beat the pants off of the men.
Right. Right.
I mean, it's true, right?
Yeah.
But as the broad spectrum, and the reality is that men are built stronger.
Absolutely. Yeah. So after the Olympics in 1984, the basketball team thought it would be hilarious if they would all race me, right? And these guys are huge, and they're like shoulders out to here. I mean, in no other way am I going to be able to beat them. But so we I always gave them a head start just to really, punch it in there. And then they just don't have the technique or the whatever. So they haven't. I mean, I have 10,000 hours in swimming, and they didn't. And right, and they thought it was hilarious. They thought it was so funny, like, oh my God, look at this. This is incredible, right? So, only about maybe 300 or 400 men could beat me, but that's enough to wipe me out of the field of never going to the Olympics or never. Okay, so the law measures equality in 3 different ways, and I've never met a current student who didn't know exactly how they were being discriminated. 1 is you have to give women equal opportunities to be able to participate. 2 is you have to treat them the same way. So equal promotions and equal medical care and equal coaching, the same quality.
Housing, locker rooms,
right? Facilities, right, all that. And then 3rd is you have to give them equal scholarship dollars. So if you go, we have a website called Title9Schools.com, and it goes through every single school in the country. We use the data that comes from schools themselves that does those 3 metrics. How many opportunities that a school needs to add in order to be equal, number 1. How many scholarship dollars do they need to add? Right now, schools need to add in total for the whole country. There are about a little over 2,000 schools. They need to add about 190,000 opportunities for girls and women to be able to participate. And they need to add about $1.2 billion in college scholarship dollars. So we're actually going backwards ever since Mark Emmert came on board the NCAA. He quit monitoring how schools were doing, and of course, they went backwards.
When was that?
2010, when Mark Emmert came on board, he said, this is just a waste of money for us to be doing this, and essentially let the women sue. Right? And that's what they've done, is let the women sue. If they want to have equality, they're going to need to sue to do that.
I don't want to jump ahead, but you have an organization that you founded that actually steps in to help young women.
We do. So
referring to.
So my organization is called championwomen.org. It's all one word, championwomen.org. And Champion Women, I say our job is to get the party started. So when Mary knows that I'm good at that. So what we do is we reach out to students, and we have to build a community. It's not as easy as you think. Your average 18 to 22-year-old, from this age group, they're not going to sue their school unless you build a community around them. And as soon as they have that community around them, then they're pretty good. Then they want to go for it. And usually after I kind of explain the law, there's only two things that you decide in any lawsuit. Any lawsuit is, what are the facts? Was the light red or green? And then two is, what's the law? Meaning, well, is it okay that I give the football players more than the track athletes? The answer is no. Okay. But so right? So the law is equal is equal is equal is equal. And the facts are usually hard in a case like sexual assault, or if somebody's being discriminated against, like they didn't get hired, they didn't get fired. That's hard. Athletics, not so hard, because there's a, like a 10-year-old can go in and look at these locker rooms and look at these locker rooms and say, are those equal? And if the answer is no, then it probably doesn't pass Title IX. So
Nancy,
that's the basics right there.
I feel like we're just scratching the surface. There's so many ways we can go with this, but Marlon, I really want to hear from you. I'm surrounded here by lawyers, 2 lawyers here, so if it gets too deep, let us know. But Marlon, if you can explain to us the educational aspect about this and how you deal with it on a regular basis.
The quote I saw that explains Title IX the best was actually by Napoleon Bonaparte. And he said, ability is nothing without opportunity. And opportunity is what is needed. The law says that we will not discriminate in programs and activities at an educational institution based on sex, which means gender. And so my job as the Title IX coordinator is to talk with students, is to observe and to monitor all of the activities of the university. Athletics and sexual assault get all of the publicity, but it's the entire university that is responsible for meeting Title IX. So the first thing that I have to do is educate our faculty and staff that Title IX is not my job or the office of the people who work for me. It's the job of the entire university. And I found one of the best ways to explain it is to look at the number of students at your university who receive some type of federal financial assistance. I work here at UNF. We have about 71% of our students that get aid. What you need to understand is federal aid isn't just Pell Grants. There are a lot of state scholarships that are funded by federal dollars. They're the majority of the research dollars that our professors are using to advance their academic discipline is funded by federal dollars. So if we're found in violation of Title IX and the federal government comes in and takes all of their money, what we're left with is the 29% of students who are actually writing a check to attend our university. So if we go from 17,000 students to approximately 4,000 students, we don't need all of you professors. We don't need all of you staff members because we don't need a 1-to-1 ratio of students to faculty. No school is going to have that. And right now, my position is required by the federal government. So if you can't do things for the right reasons, will you do things so that your job remains and that you can remain employed? So I try to make people connect with a personal reason for doing the right thing. But Title IX starts with recruiting for admissions. It's the dormitories and the housing. One of the things that people don't look at, that is something that I try to particularly monitor, is what are our enrollments like in our STEM programs? Do we have academic advisors who are trying to steer women away from engineering, to steer women away from the hard sciences, the biologies, and the chemistries? and why. We have an engineering school, and so I talk with our female engineering students, and it starts early. They say even in their group projects, the guys want to make them the secretaries. The guys want them to take the notes at the meetings.
In this day and age.
Yes, today. They don't want them building the structures. And there's a reason. Because there are university dollars that send students to present their scholarship. And the men want all of those opportunities. There are research opportunities with professors. And the men know, and the men will go and meet with these professors day one and make friends and say, oh, I want to help create knowledge in this area and I want to work in your lab. And the professors don't have an established way of selecting people. And that's why I come in. Do you have a policy? Do you have a procedure? I don't want to know your practice. I want to know what it says on paper, what it is that our students can read so that they know what the playing field is. You know, every time women start gaining on men, they change the rules of the game. And so one of my jobs is to make sure that if we're changing the rules, we change them for everybody and we inform everybody so that everybody has an equal footing. One of the worst cases I had to investigate last year, there were 2 female students trying to get a research position with a professor. And the first thing he asked them to do was remove their mask. He needed to know what they looked like. What difference does it make what she looks like if she's doing academic research? And we still have some of those people, and they feel that because they're tenured, they can't be removed, but they can. And it's my job to investigate, to get all the information, to get all of the knowledge that we can use to show the provost and the president that this is an area of risk for our university. And if we allow this person to continue, our federal dollars are at stake.
So this is an ongoing process. This is what you deal with every day.
Every day.
And do you feel like the university is making headway?
Some, but it's slow. My first year here, I was at Florida International before I came here. And my first year here, I had a staff of 3, including myself, and we had 129 cases. We don't just investigate Title IX cases, we investigate all discrimination. So whether it's religion or disability, national origin, gender, and the sexual assault, dating violence, domestic violence, and stalking, all of those are things. When we moved online and virtual, I was told, oh, your office ain't gonna have anything to do because people are at home, and so they're not gonna be able to harass people. Well, they just relocated the harassment. That year, we went down to 124 cases. And last year, 2021, 2022, we had 120, and we're still an office of 3.
When you refer to harassment, can you define for us, like give us some examples of harassment and how it pertains to Title IX and how it can protect our students?
One of the issues we have with sexual harassment and one of the hardest things to work with is in athletics. Because athletics is one of those career paths where you can move immediately from student, team member in May, to graduate assistant in June, to full-time assistant coach by December. So you established a relationship with these persons as your peer. But once they become a graduate assistant, once they become an assistant coach, they're no longer your peer. They're now in a supervisory capacity. And even though they don't have direct ability to determine if you're going to compete or how often you're going to compete or if you're going to get introduced for a travel team. They have access to the head coach, and they talk to the head coach. And so if you're trying to date me and I let you know I'm not interested, if you're vindictive, if you're manipulative, you then go to my head coach and say, I don't know if you really need to play Nancy because you're not seeing Nancy like I see Nancy. And maybe, Mary would be better. And so trying to be able to prove that is the difficult part. Then we get people who come and they want to bring claims of hostile work environment. But hostile work environment must be based on your membership in a protected class. So the person has to be mean and nasty to you because you're female, or because you're black, or because you're Jewish, or because you have a disability. And unfortunately, we have a lot of people who are mean and nasty to everybody. And so when you're mean and nasty to everybody, I can't get to hostile work environment because that's more of a recruitment issue in human resources and being able to fully vet people before we bring them into our community. And a lot of people are good at masking who they really are until they're hired. And once they're hired, it's a lot harder to get rid of them.
As an athlete, did you encounter this in your career, in your college career?
I didn't encounter that kind of harassment just because I was 3 standard deviations better than, I was the only scholarship athlete at Duke University.
Oh.
So, but for this law, none of that would have mattered. It wouldn't have mattered how many world and American records I held, the fact that I was a 1980 Olympian, the fact that nothing would have mattered. I would have been a female, and I was not going to get a college scholarship, no matter how hard I worked, et cetera. So this statute, literally, it created my Olympic career.
Yeah, so if there was no Title IX, you would not be who you are
I would not
today.
be who I am today, yeah.
So you have to remember, Nancy and I are about the same age. When I was in high school, I was a cheerleader, and I thought about participating in tennis. But at that time, I was going to have the same end result. My career was going to end at graduation. I wasn't going to be able to compete afterwards. It was my sophomore year in college before the NCAA had championships for women's sports teams. So women weren't pushed to compete. There were no championship activities. Nancy was in an individual sport. Tennis was an individual sport. But our universities recruit international players for tennis. They don't recruit Americans for tennis. Still.
That's remarkable.
Yeah, well, that coach gets evaluated based on wins and losses. Mm-hmm. And if the best players are internationally, that's where the coach is going to go. It's not just about, discriminating against Americans. It is how if coaches were evaluated based on how many Americans that they graduated, then you would see, different metrics there.
You have a young daughter.
I do.
Who, and I wonder, do you have discussions about Title IX? Does she, you know what I mean? You grew up totally different, right?
Totally
Backgrounds,
different.
and opportunities.
Opportunity is the key word. She was born on a college campus. I was working at Florida A&M University when she was born, and that was when I became familiar with your name again, because I went to FAMU right after they had cut the women's golf team, and then they had to add it back. And part of the reason it got added back was because of Nancy. Nancy reached out to those parents and let them know that they can't just get rid of your team just for no reason. So it was less than a month, the team was back.
That's incredible.
But my daughter had, the men's basketball players were her big brothers, the volleyball coaches were her big sisters, She was on a college campus, and I worked in sports until she was 9. When she started competing is when I moved over to the Title IX side, because she spent all of her time watching other people compete, and she wasn't able to compete. She was able to play almost every sport. I gave her all lessons. I hated to see the parent that only put their child in the one sport that they liked, and then the kid would come to me as a compliance officer in their sophomore year in college and say, I don't want to play anymore. I've been playing the sport since I was 4. So she did everything. She picked basketball. She is 5'9", but she tore her ACL in the 8th grade.
Oh, no.
And that surgery left mental scars that are still there.
Yeah.
Swimming.
Swimming.
A good illustration is my goddaughter. She and I went to the same high school and the same college. I graduated high school in 1980. She graduated in 2008. When she was 6, I was working for the Olympic Committee, and she was a little gymnast. So I got her parents tickets to take her to see the USA team. When she realized that we weren't going to win the gold medal, she said, I want to go home. And they were like, do you know how hard it was to get these tickets? You're going to sit here and cheer. When she went to middle school, she said to us, Auntie, I don't want to try for the Olympics anymore. It's too much work. I just want to get a college scholarship. And there was an opportunity. And she was able to get a college scholarship to the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And Nancy, I love seeing her mom, who was a former Duke cheerleader, have to wear Carolina blue and cheer for the Tar Heels for 4 years. It was great. But it goes back to opportunity. There was not the same opportunity for the women who graduated high school when Nancy and I did to really want to continue. I was only one girl at my high school who played volleyball who was able to go to Davidson College on a partial scholarship because women's athletics just wasn't important enough. And Title IX and the threat of the removal of those federal dollars made it important enough.
Incredible. And how we got here, I think we want to get Barbara Jo Palmer. Is she available? Barbara, are you? You are. Yay, Barbara. Hey, Barbara. How are you?
It's just that I couldn't see you. And so technically I kept trying to, how can I see the panel? How can I see the panel? So anyway, I've been paying attention though.
Barbara, we're so glad you're joining us. I know you're a busy woman. Could you tell us, give us a little bit of the history of Title IX and how, because we've been talking about its importance and its impact and assessing it, but we'd love to hear your experience and how, from the athletic director perspective, but also the history of getting it, lobbying to get it passed and what it took to get the law passed.
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you for this opportunity. It's been a long time since I've been able to really talk about the history of women's sports. 50 years. I can't believe that much time has gone by. Right. But I became women's athletic director in 1977 at Florida State University. And at that time, I did not ask the right questions in the interview process because when I walked in the first day, I found out that in my top right-hand drawer, there was all this money down in there. And in the corner over here was a whole stack of tennis racket covers. And they were raising money to let the volleyball team go to a regional competition. So the bottom line is the women had at that time $163,000. I was full-time being paid like $18,000, some amount of money, not much. And I had a secretary. All of the coaches were not paid at the time. And so you can just imagine the uphill battle that we had. And as you know, you all are talking about the way it is now and the way it has been in the last few years. But back then, there were not just, people just were worried. They were really worried that men's sports, it would be the demise of men's sports for women to participate because of the lack of funding. So I had been, my degree was in therapeutic recreation, and I had actually been working to get people with disabilities out of institutions and back into the community. And so I was writing grants for Title VII. And so when they interviewed me for this, they said, how are you going to raise the money? And I said, well, I'll just write a grant, and we'll get money. Well, nobody on the interview committee, nor myself, knew that Title IX had no money attached to it. So I wasn't going to be able to get one dime from the federal government on it. It was an unfunded mandate. And that's what scared schools. It was an unfunded mandate. So what we felt like we needed to do was figure out a way to raise money. I mean, I didn't want to ruin men's sports either, So what we did was we took a look at, well, before I do that, let me tell you what happened. About 2 weeks after I was on the job, the volleyball team that we were raising the money for was getting ready to go. And back then you didn't have to wear seatbelts. So there was this, big van, and they're all in there with their, the whole team is in one van. And I remember having to put a pillow down in the runway where you close the door for one of the kids to sit for like an 8-hour drive someplace, And I've said to myself right then and there, this will never happen again on my watch. This will not. And so part of what we did at that time was set up a series of, and I mean a bunch of speaking engagements for me to do. And also Sarah Hill from Florida A&M and some booster types too, but mainly would go to civic clubs, men's civics clubs. And I would tell them that story. And I'd say, why in the world would you treat your daughter that way? Where she has to be crammed into a van, driven 8 hours up someplace, compete, have a fast food thing, and come back. Why would you do that to your daughters? When your son is flying the day before, getting to practice some, compete, spend the night again, and then fly back. That doesn't make any sense. So quite frankly, I think a lot of the men really, they had daughters. And so we started a booster group that started, some of the men, quite frankly, gave the most money in the very beginning. I mean, full scholarships, endowed scholarships. So the bottom line is it took not just women, but men that cared too. And so we launched a major effort to raise money, but that still wasn't enough. We got the legislature to authorize matching scholarships and so on. But what we really needed was to look at what are the requirements of Title IX? And what do we need to do to meet those requirements? So what we did was put together a formula. And some of it was controversial, but you got to keep in mind back then, the women had $163,000. The men had $5 million. Little bit of disparity there, okay? And so the first thing we did was we got some money. Student government gave us some money. Coaches went on part-time and so on. But we knew in order to get equity the way we really needed to, we've got to go to the legislature. And I had lobbied some for people with disabilities. So I knew a few contacts. So what they told me was, well, in order to do that, you're going to have to prove the discrimination and the amount of money you need in order to not be discriminating. So the only way to do that was to put together a formula. And so what we did was this. We looked at all the requirements, and by the way, the descriptions that you've heard today are absolutely accurate. Things have to be fair. They have to be equal and so on. So what we did was we looked at I did first Florida State University to look at that. What are the men's budget? Every line item in their budget. And And what we did was we took a look at, let's use player supplies as an example. For all of the men's budgets for player supplies, we added all that up and we got the average of the amount, okay? Now, the one thing we did that was controversial, but you keep in mind that we didn't have any money and we had to be reasonable about what we were going to go ask for, okay? So we gave football a deductible, okay, and added them in as the average of the other men's sports. And then we came up with what is the amount that we should be having for player supplies for women. And without getting into all of the detail about that, the bottom line is I had to do some covert stuff with a few people that were in the Board of Regents because the men did not want us to have all of the state universities' budgets for men's sports. So we had to get people to get them in a secret way. And so what we did was once we got all the men's budgets, we put the formula together for every state university in Florida. And I went to the two main people in the Senate and in the House that controlled, the big leader in the Senate, Dempsey Barron, the big leader in the House, Herb Morgan, and talked to them about this situation. And at the time, ERA was the big thing. And so when I walked into Dempsey Barron's office, he said, if you're in here to talk to me about the ERA, you can turn around and walk right out. And I said, no, I know you believe that there is equity out there. I know that that's your position, but I need to show you a place where there really isn't. And so I proceeded to show them the amount of money that the men were getting and the amount that the women were getting. And I told them, I said, look, back in whatever year it was, I can't remember now, but because that's 50 years ago, by the way, you all gave men money from the legislature to start their men's sports. So why aren't you doing the same thing for the women? And so when we put together the amount that was needed, just to give you an example, Florida State University went from 163,000 to 1.3 million. We also did the same thing for facilities. If the men had facilities, then we put in for the amount for facilities for women. Now, was it total equity? No, not really. But it was a very good start, and it was a huge, made a huge difference, let me say. I mean, we won 5 national championships for women in the next 3 or 4 years. Now, back then, remember, it was AIAW, Association for Intercollegiate Athletics for Women. The NCAA didn't want to have a thing, not one thing to do with women's sports, nothing. We had different rules. We were, we didn't recruit the same way they did. We allowed our athletes to work if they needed to. Some things like that we felt were better for, and when I say we, I'm talking about AIW, was better for the student athlete, okay, not the semi-professional athlete, but the student athlete. But what ended up happening over the years, because I ran for president of AIW at the time the NCAA was trying to take us over, because in my university, and mostly in Florida and others, did not want NCAA to take over women's sports. But they did, and I lost the election because they did take it over. So back then, I know when you look at now what is going on, you think we have a long way to go. Let me tell you, baby, you've come a long way. One of the things and that's not to say we don't have more to do, because we do, but one of the other things that was so frustrating for us is that we would win a national championship, and guess what? The media didn't even cover it. We never had any coverage, okay? So now, when I turn on the TV and I watch women's sports, I feel so excited, and I am so proud of the work that so many, and I am a pioneer. I mean, Lord knows how I got this old, I don't know, but I am, and I am a living pioneer, and I have seen a difference. And I do think that there are things that need to be done still, a lot of things. But don't you misunderstand the fact that young women now have an opportunity that they did not have back in 1977. I was an athlete and I did not have those opportunities. I wish I had, because I would have been a scholarship athlete. But now that opportunity is there for folks. I wanted to just remind folks also, if I could go back a little bit before that, there were a lot of women that were in physical education back then. The National Association of Girls and Women's Sports, those were the coaches of the teams that did travel. Those coaches worked for free. A lot of times they took money out of their own pockets to allow girls to travel. So I think we need to really give some accolades to those coaches that came prior to 1977, because they were the real pioneers.
Barbara, thank you. Thank you for everything you've done. That's incredible. It is really remarkable, but Nancy was pointing out, but it took 50 years. How long did it take once the process for the lobbying started? I'm just interested in that. How long did it take for it to really take hold and then for it to become law?
The interesting thing is, there was a lot of resistance that first year, except for the two champions that I told. And because they had so much power, this was going to pass. I mean, that's all there is to it. And I can't remember the total amount, but it was, I want to say, it was millions and millions, because it was for all the state schools, and millions also for the facilities that had to be built. So it was a significant amount. The first year, what we did was we went in for an amount of money where student government would be matched to give us some. So there was an amount of money for the very first year. The next year, when we did the real education when we really did this full court press lobbying and we educated people, is when we got the millions that went out there. And the interesting thing is, this is really hysterical back then and now, is the men that were afraid of this and had schools in their area that were like, they weren't, back then there were only like 3 big universities, University of Central Florida and South Florida, and those were not universities yet, they were colleges, okay? So the ones in West Florida, in North Florida, those schools were not like they are now. But the legislators that represented that area came in after we got all the money for the other schools and said, wait a minute, we want money for our women too. So they ended up adding more even the next year for those other schools. So it perpetuated itself for a while. But then, quite frankly, the amount of money that the state was putting in for women was a drop in the bucket as men's sports grew. Because I don't even know what the men's budget is now at Florida State University, but I'm sure it's way over 5 million. The women's is probably over 5 million at this point. Yeah. So anyway, it took about 3 years when we first started, but the money actually started flowing in 79, I believe it was 79.
Thank you, Barbara. So your message is very powerful for young women. Are you able to spread that word now? Right now I'm doing something that is a life passion for me as well. Athletics was not only my passion, because it was something very personal, but it also was, it was a very, very good learning lesson. When you're working with men like this, you've got to learn how to negotiate. You've got to learn how to do different things. And I truly believe through sports, women have been able to learn things that men have had all along. They're networking. It doesn't matter what state you're in. If you played sports and you go to another state and you play basketball, and you're doing a business deal and you find out that you were a basketball player, oh boy, I mean, there it is. You've got a link right there. And that's what's happening for women now.
which I think is wonderful. And I can't remember what your original question was, but
I'm just wondering how you spread the word now, because you just had such a great message for young people and what they should, that maybe they don't know your background, and know what it was like in the 70s as a student
I'm
athlete.
asked from time to time to speak to different groups, and I do that whenever I can. But
good.
in Florida State has had me back, but not really. I'm not doing that. And my passion right now is I'm come full circle all the way around from where I was in '76 to where I am now, which is I run the Agency for Persons with Disabilities for the state of Florida. And
wow.
so I have 50,000 people right now that I'm trying to make sure that they're getting what they need. And my passion has always been public service and helping people that are the underdogs. And what a great place to learn was in athletics, because it was a place where there were very few women, and lobbying. You know what? There were only a handful of lobbyists down there. I was one of the few women that was lobbying at the time. So I learned a lot of lessons that have served me well now in this, because I'm dealing with the legislature, the governor's office, all these things where I've learned through athletics and the things that I learned in athletics, how to do that.
Isn't that incredible? Thank you so, so much. Woo. Barbara Jo Palmer, everybody. It's incredible.
I wish I was there.
I wish you were too.
Too.
I was supposed to give you a hug too. Yeah. From Marty Fiorentino. Sends his love.
Oh, I love him. Yes.
He's here in spirit. A fellow lobbyist. He apparently knew her well back then. I asked my husband, so I'm showing him the names of the panelists. He goes, oh gosh. He goes, they're all awesome. He goes, Barbara, I have to give her a hug. She goes, we go way back. So it makes a lot of sense, right? So what do you think, right? Yes. Nancy, do you have anything you would like to ask Barbara?
Yeah, well, it's not so much as ask, but I just want everybody here to notice what the philosophy was back when I was swimming and when she was the athletic director, which is not appropriate today. And I just want to get your feelings on it. Don't go anywhere. Oh, I'm on. When I saw it going like this, I thought it was her. Sorry. Is number one is it's okay for women to have opportunities so long as no man.
I found this on the web for his number one. Check it out.
Who did that?
I don't know what that was.
Okay,
hold that. You got it?
Yeah, it's okay for women to have equality so long as no man is ever hurt. Right? So it's sort of like we will allow, right? That's called sexism 101. So in my family, I had a son, and then 4.5 years later, we had twin girls. So and the way that we looked at it was, we didn't say, we don't have any money to pay for these girls because he's getting all of it. We looked at, we're a 5-person family, and we got to make sure that everybody gets treated equally. So in the same ways that's how athletic departments need to start thinking. The second thing is that was appropriate back in that age, but is not appropriate anymore, is this idea that women athletes are lucky for what it is that they have. We never tell men that what they have is they're lucky. You should be grateful, because it's not equal. So if you go onto our website, title9schools.com, so again, I could pull up any school. I could pull up my school, right? But these gaps get added. Think about every school. At Florida State, they need to add 121 opportunities before they're giving women equality, which is about 5 teams, depending on the size of the team, right? Some teams are really big, like track and field or rowing, and some teams are really small. But 121, The scholarship gap at Florida State University is almost $4 million. Every single year, women are getting $4 million less in college scholarship dollars. So the law is there for them. So that's what Champion Women does. That's what we do, is we help get the party started, because if there's no pressure to get equality, there's not going to be equality. They're just going to keep right on going exactly the way that it is. The Department of Education is not doing it. We sent letters to every single legislator by state, and we showed them what every single school was doing in that state. And now the General Accounting Office is reaching out to us, asking us, like, how did you get these numbers? And so some of those legislators went to the GAO and said, look into this. Make sure all this numbers are accurate, and they are. And actually, I'd really like to thank Lori Day, who's here, who I know helped. Yeah, she's on the commission. Her daughter helped us, Chloe, helped us put the database and the website together. I made Chloe do like this torturous work of right now, if you go onto the database, and it tells you how many men and how many women, it actually counts in the women's category. Male practice players count as women. So if you have 10 men that are on the women's basketball team, say, and they just help out with practices, you want to get really tall people. Everybody wants to work out with people who are better than they are. They actually count as women, so we take that number out, because they're not women, right? And so we take that number out, and then we do our data collection from there. So if you're wondering, how come I get different numbers than what Champion Women numbers, that's why. But again, Duke University needs to add 100 opportunities, 4 teams. They need to add over $1 million, 1.2 million, right? It's not just Florida State. And where is the pressure going to come from so that women expect equality? When I started off in my remarks saying, do women athletes, current women, think that they're getting treated equally as what the men are getting? And they all say no, they are not. In every possible metric, whether it's facilities, or one of the things that's really important to them right now is NIL, is making sure that they get promoted in the same way the men's team gets promoted, because that's money in their pocket that they're going to be able to use. So they want equal time on the website of the school. They want equal promotion of their games and their wins, and they're like she was just saying, national champions, and people didn't know about it.
All right, and don't you think this? I'm just You got me thinking here. And I'm thinking about how I grew up, and very fortunate, I feel like, in a wonderful family, loving, the youngest of 6, and all girls, 1 boy. So my parents, who I thought were very progressive and open to new ideas, and no sexism, nothing like that. No way, there's no. But if you think about it, it's interesting. My brother is the one they saved for college. And the rest of us, there was no college fund. I'm not complaining, never did, but it was interesting. So what happened? My brother took off and never went to college, and we bought, Mom and Dad put in a swimming pool. What? Yeah, and then the rest of us girls, we all went to college. We paid, I worked at a gas station. I mean, everybody worked, and Mom and Dad helped too when we moved to another city and went to the University of Oregon. But I got a diploma. My brother doesn't. It's fine. He's a lovely man. I love him so much. But you know what? He struggles though. Healthcare, you know what I mean? He has definitely had the rougher go of everybody. And I'm not blaming my parents, but it's interesting how I think as women, as girls, we're raised to we just don't really think about it. It was kind of, and this was definitely, I'm a product of the 60s, so it was kind of, we just accepted it and went on.
Right.
But you bring up a great point.
Right. So my job is to talk to her 18-year-old self
Yeah.
and say, this is sexism.
Yeah. And I never would have thought that.
Yeah, right. Because, you know, like, sexism is kind of like rain. So, I mean, it hits
It's not
everybody.
intentional. It's
yeah,
not
no,
necessarily
well,
intentional.
sometimes
Well, it
it's
can be.
intentional,
Okay,
but-
you're right. And that's why we're here.
It's intentional a lot of times.
But you know, like, it hits, sexism and racism are like rain. They hit everybody, and it's not until sort of something happens to you that you can sort of get the idea like, oh, I can't accomplish out of this. I can't be smart enough or ambitious enough or whatnot to be able to outrun, if you will, sexism. And you know, I just had a big birthday in April. I just turned 60, and I know you're all shocked. And
We are. It's not possible.
so,
It's not possible.
you guys, I've been doing this my entire career, and we are so far from equality. It's not even funny. Like, we got to get going here. We got to. I love my work. I can't imagine retiring. So I figure, you know, 10, 15 more years of working, and that's like, then I'm going to have to hand it off. Those of you that are younger out there, like, you're going to have to do it, right? Because time is not going to handle racism and sexism. Time is not going to do it. We've got to be intentional about it. And the athletic department is such a good way of like measuring how the school feels about women generally, because it's a very objective measurement that what women are experiencing right now at FSU, right now. They made decisions 15 years ago what they would be, how much scholarship dollars that women would be having today. Careers, to stay in the workforce, right? She showed that, like, sort of, right, you could have the hypothesis that people who went into sports, they were going to do well in life anyway, right? That, you know.
But isn't it also the discipline? Isn't it the constant,
Exactly.
yes.
What she showed is
improvement, betterment, time management.
Right, that only sports as an after-school activity had somebody out-predict what they would have done. Right, everybody has a prediction based on zip code, how much education parents have, how much money parents have, blah, 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 right? So if you take that prediction, that sport out-predicts it, right? Whereas being on the student government or being in the band or other after-school activities, those are great activities, but they don't out-predict, right? People just conform to what they would have done without those after-school activities. Sports out-predicts what somebody does. So that's another reason why when we're denying almost 200,000 women the opportunity to participate and stay in the workforce longer, have healthier pregnancies, less likely to get cancer, less likely to get diabetes, less likely to have heart disease, on and on, like mental health, physical health, professional lives, what it means for somebody to have that sports experience, it's a game changer. It changes the trajectory of a woman's life for the rest of her life.
And Nancy, one of the things that people don't look at a lot is Title IX also covers pregnant and parenting students. And we are required to provide simple things like lactation rooms to make sure that there's somewhere that they can go. If someone has just given birth and they have to, it's in the middle of a semester, we have to allow them to finish those academic classes without a financial penalty. If they have to take it incomplete, even if they have to withdraw from the class, when they re-enroll in the class, they are not supposed to pay for that class again because it is a medical condition. It is only pregnant women that we try to put extra burdens on. If someone says they have diabetes, we're falling over for whatever we can do to make sure we can keep their blood sugar levels up. But when people are pregnant, we want them to just go home and be quiet and get out of the way. And one of the problems one of the cases I had was actually with a young man who took time away when his wife gave birth. And some of his professors were trying to give him a hard time. They were like, well, students don't have paternity leave, and he told me he was going to miss class for paternity leave. Well, that's where we get into truth and accuracy. Yes, it is true. Students don't have paternity leave. That is only for employees. But Title IX says we have to make accommodations for parents, for people who are parenting, and that would include him as a father.
That's fascinating. I didn't know that. Eye-opening. Real quickly, if you have questions, yes, please go ahead and raise your cards up, and we're going to come around and pick them up, and then we're going to, thank you. That's fantastic. What are the things that we could be doing now then? What could we be doing, and for Barbara as well, she's still with us, right? Okay, great. That we could be doing to make sure that this doesn't go away. Like Nancy says, time is of the essence. We can't just let this try to heal itself. It's not going to do it. So who wants to pick that one up?
This is Barbara. Can I comment?
Yes, Barbara.
Okay. I thought Nancy made a very good point about the fact that, you know, women should not be so grateful that they have these opportunities. And I've been saying that for a long time because they're entitled to these opportunities. And I do think that there is that feeling that's out there that, you know, they ought to be grateful, yes. But take a look at what the soccer team did. I mean, that was impressive, the way that they got equal pay and so on. And it was very well deserved. So my suggestion, and I remember what it was like back then in trying to get the data, the information together to be able to make a case. And that's what has to happen here. There's so many organizations that are behind this, and obviously I'm not in that right now, but there are organizations, and the truth of the matter is, if they get together and they come up with and I think she gave some good examples of some data that can be used about what it does to help people, their health and everything. But anyway, get the data together of what is the difference in what the women are getting now? What are the advantages that they're not getting because they're being denied? All of these things, I mean, you have to have the heartstring stuff as well as the facts. And you get that together and put together a lobbying tree nationwide and go lobby the heck out of this. I mean, it's not going to happen by each of these individual little groups yelling and saying, we need to have equity. We need to have equity. No, you got to show, how do you get it?
Exactly. Okay.
Well, actually, so plaintiffs, meaning the student athletes, it's not their job to tell the school, how do you create equality? It is their job to say, I expect equality. You're not giving it to me. Give it to me now. I'm entitled to it. You're giving me substandard locker rooms, substandard facilities. I want you all to go to any school that you've ever seen in your entire life and tell me if the if the baseball facility and the softball facility, that a 10-year-old would walk into those facilities and say those were equal. So it's the job of the athlete to say, you need to be providing equality. How you do it.
Nancy, let me interrupt you just for a second.
Yeah, go.
I do think that the student athlete has the responsibility to say the things you're saying. But I think the responsibility of correcting this wrong belongs on us, not the athlete. We need to be putting together a concerted effort with the data and the information that you've been talking about. I mean, we all can talk about these things and complain about the way it is and point out where the inequities are. We all can do that ad nauseum, okay? But you have to have a plan, and you have to have an action plan to make things happen. And it's not the responsibility of the athlete.
It's not it shouldn't technically be the responsibility of the athletes, but until let's put the athletes aside. Where else is the pressure going to come from? In 2022, Lori Day's daughter was part of this big group. Chloe, she did an amazing job, was part of a big group. We sent letters to every single school, the president, the athletic director, the conference leader, right? We had a huge project where we sent out these letters. You know what it did? Nothing. Did it, by telling athletic directors what the numbers were and how, we gave them a whole legal memo that if they had paid me, it probably would have been, I don't know, $15,000 to write this legal memo.
Nancy, though, you're going to the wrong people with that because they're the ones that are threatened. You have to go to the decision makers, which are the legislature. It's the people that make the decisions. That's who has to have the data because these guys that you're talking about are telling them the opposite.
Right.
So the decision
So
maker is not at that level.
Right. So we did that. We sent letters to every single legislator in both the House and the Senate, and we told them, we broke it out by state and said, in your state, here's the school, here's the number of opportunities they need to add, here's the scholarship dollars, and here's the recruiting dollars that they need to add. I'm hopeful, given that the GAO wants to know where we got the information, but I'd say it really is going to take a concerted effort. The Department of Education, I don't think they're going to do it. I don't know, Congress, probably not. But if we can get 18 to 22-year-olds, build a community around them, we've already been wildly successful at Dartmouth, Stanford, University of Iowa, Michigan State, William and Mary, Fresno State University, San Diego State University, all of these universities that champion women, we worked with to get this community for them to ask for equality. We're not done.
One of the issues is some of the schools that do not have football or even major basketball have a much easier way to provide equity, and they should. I mean, they really should. They have no reason not to. But when you throw in football and basketball and even baseball in some areas, what happens is that they are revenue generating. They bring in all this money. It's almost like those schools are the ones that are not providing the equity you're talking about.
Okay, let me push back because I have the data. The data says that some of the worst schools for compliance are the Power 5 schools. The schools where all the money is that have the football and the basketball programs.
That's my point.
University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill needs to add almost 400 women to its athletic department. They need to add $7 million to their college scholarships. It's not that they don't have the money. These are where they're rolling in the money. So in court, schools have tried over and over to try to exempt football and men's basketball and sometimes baseball from the Title IX calculations, and they failed every time. The legislature, the same thing. You've got very powerful coaches and presidents of universities that go to their legislature and say, let us carve these out. And it's failed every time. Why? Because football is an educational program or activity, and you cannot discriminate based on sex, period. It's not an excuse.
I'm not saying that you should carve them out at all. What I'm saying is that's where the majority of the discrimination is taking place.
Oh, that's not true. It's so we have the data. It's just not true.
I think what she's saying has been my experience because I worked at an SEC school for 3 years, and the money that is spent on football, one of the ways that they try to get around giving equal money to the women's sports is they're saying, well, the boosters gave it earmarked for football.
Right.
And so if Mickey Mouse gave it earmarked for football, we have to give it to football. Now, the athletic director, you and I know, is supposed to then find that money to put on the women's side, but they're saying that they can't.
Okay, so you know how I started off my remarks by saying that, I'm getting riled up now, folks. Okay.
15 minutes.
Yeah,
15
you know how I
minutes.
started off by saying, we had Brown versus Board of Education, then we had Title VI, then Title IX, right? So, Title VI prohibited a school from discriminating based on race, color, national origin. What that meant was a donor could not go and say, I'm going to build you this building so long as no people of color can go in that building. You can't do that under Title VI.
But it continued to happen.
Yeah, well, hold on, but because sport is intentionally sex segregated, when you give to football, you're giving to men. So a school cannot, it's been tried in the legislature, in the Department of Ed, the agency, and in courts of law. They try to say that was donated, or that was sponsorship money, or that was ticket money, or it doesn't matter the source of the funds. Women and men who are students at that university are entitled to non-discrimination, regardless of the source of the funds. So all those revenue sources are they're not a pass. Women should get equality. And when we do this,
we're all agreeing with what you're saying. And I don't know why you're pushing back with what I'm saying. I'm just trying to say that the football schools and the major basketball schools are having the hardest time doing this because of a lot of different reasons. The other schools have no excuse. They have no excuse. They should be doing it immediately. And the football schools and the big basketball schools, there needs to be a concerted effort, whether it's in the NCAA or wherever it is, to zero in on where the real problem is. It's not just everywhere. It's really in these schools that have these big programs.
Barbara, thank you. And I hate to do this, but we only have 10 minutes left. We have so many questions from our audience, you wouldn't believe it. So I just didn't expect that. I'm so grateful to all of you. So this is going to, I'm sure one of them, the one I'm going to ask is open up a huge can of worms. But there are several of you asked the same question. So what is the current discussion and advocacy for transgender athletes? And I know it's the elephant in the room pretty much, right? Going on right now. So let's keep our answers succinct, though. I think we have to stay sort of short.
Real quickly, so sports are sex segregated based on biology, not based on identity. Swimming had Leah Thomas, who swam for Penn, and then swam in the NCAA's, won an NCAA event. And so USA Swimming and our international governing body have now said, as soon as somebody experiences male puberty, that they cannot go compete in the women's category. They're not eligible to compete in the women's category. This is the 50th anniversary of Title IX, right? I had very specific ideas on what we were going to be doing this year, and Leah Thomas really threw everything up in the air. We have 400 Olympians, Paralympians, and national team athletes who have all signed on to our petition, which says, as between three values of sport, right? The first one is safety, right? Women are much more prone to getting concussions, even not just from direct hits, but they are especially prone to concussions from doing this, bang, right? Their neck muscles are nowhere near as strong. So safety. Two is equity. We very much want to be inclusive of, right, what we have done to make sure that lesbians in particular feel comfortable in women's sports. And then third is the idea of fairness, that you have category fairness, right? We have a ton of categories in sports. There's no bigger gap between performance in categories besides sex. In other words, when you look at, let's say weightlifting, okay? So whatever the weight is, and then you look at the next up category, and what's the difference in percentage of what, right, how much the category is, it's never what it is for male, female. That's the biggest gap is in the category of men, women. It's between 10 for sports like swimming and track and field, and up to 50% when it requires explosive strength. We know what sports would look like if we just said, you know, anybody can try out. And it looks like the NFL, the NBA, the Major League Baseball, the National Hockey League. They're all male, not because there's discrimination against women, there is, but because women's bodies are perfectly made for what we do, right? Guys cannot do what we can do. I gave birth to an 8-pounder and a 7-pounder at the same time, right? We have unbelievable bodies that are designed very, like our hip width is different, our knee to the ankles is different. We have very different bodies, and, right, we should respect and admire those differences rather than looking at them as sort of the B team.
Okay, do you want to take the next question?
Sure.
Let's do that.
Says, what has been your experience with new rules for dealing with sexual assault and harassment? Unfortunately, we have taken what should be legislation that applies to have students have a good experience, and we've made it a political issue. When the Obama administration put together their, quote, rules, they were guidance. So schools were able to take from that guidance what they wanted to use, and what they didn't want to use, they put to the side. When Betsy DeVos went through and redid the legislation, she did it in a way that made it law. We are now presented with a new set of rules from the Biden administration to try and go back to some of the things that the Obama administration had as guidance to make law. And not coincidentally, it's done in an election year. The problems from the guidance from the Obama administration and the law for Trump, the main problems were the changes in the definitions of what constitutes sexual assault, limiting it to the United States. Betsy DeVos got real tied on the language in the United States. And so that meant that we were not able to investigate claims of sexual harassment and sexual assault that occurred in study abroad programs, even though they were part of our activities and experiences, but because they did not happen in the United States. So we worked with our legal office so that we dismissed those cases under federal Title IX, but we were still able to investigate them under our university regulations, which said they were violations of our university code of conduct. Another thing that has been very difficult is live hearings. Women who are already on the fence about whether or not they want to report a sexual assault, and you explain to them that they are going to have to sit in a student hearing across from their accuser, a lot of times just don't want to be bothered. We found out that the state of Florida has a law that prohibits the police department from giving me the full police report. So we had some women on campus who were posting on social media that my office knew about sexual assaults and would not investigate them because they knew we got police reports. Again, it goes back to truth and accuracy. They asked the police, are you going to give a copy of this police report to EOI? And they said, yes. The report I get is redacted so that it reads, on blank date, blank and blank, experience blank. There is no investigation I can do with that information. when I found that out, we were able to go and meet with all the sorority presidents and let them know you have the ability to get your own police report. So if you get a copy of your police report and send it to me, then I can investigate. So a lot of times it's our language. We have women who will say, it usually comes from the professors. Someone will miss a test, someone won't turn in a paper, they'll write their professor an email and say, I wasn't able to do that paper, I was sexually assaulted at the beach, and I've gotten behind. The professor then has to notify me for us to put supportive measures in place. And then when I talk with the student, it's, well, I was on the beach and I was at a club and this guy grabbed my behind. Well, while that is not something that should happen, that is not sexual assault. And so then it's a whole different set of rules and regulations that have to apply. So now I've got to, because I've called my boss, who's notified the president, who's notified marketing, so we have all these people on alert and campus police, and now I got to call them back and say, oh, it was sexual misconduct, but it wasn't sexual assault. Then the next time I call them, they aren't as eager to move because they're like, well, do we know it's really that? So the main problem that we have is that we have got to let our legislatures know that this is not a political issue. This is an issue of safety. And one of the, oh, I'm sorry. No, I was just saying, one of the ways that I'm able to work with my students is because 1 in 5 women are sexually assaulted or attempted sexual assault as a freshman, and I was 1 in 5. And 1 in 5 black women are raped as adults. I was 1 in 5. And so I'm able to talk to them from a place of someone who has moved from victim to survivor, so they know it's possible, so they know you can get your life back, you can be productive, and you can smile again.
You're incredible. Oh my gosh. Oh. All right, we don't have much more time. I did have one more question, but do you think we could throw it in there real quick? It's just, it's not, none of these are quick answers, but Barbara, I want to ask you, or one of our attendees asked, Ms. Nancy talks about equality, Ms. Barbara talks about equity. Can this terminology be misleading? Do you want to weigh in on that?
Oh, yes, but I think we all know what we're talking about. We're talking about fairness. I mean, we're talking about whether you say equity or equality. To me, Nancy and I are actually talking about the same thing. The reason she's so fired up is because she lives this every day.
Right.
And I totally understand where she's coming from. And I really appreciate, by the way, Nancy, I appreciate so much what you do every day because you're helping so many people. Yes.
And Marlon.
And I have to say, the feeling is mutual. Thank you so much for really being out there in the front when it was so much more hostile than it is now. Thank you.
I don't know if it was more hostile. It might have been, they were a little more ignorant. They just didn't know anything. But I think equity, we all know what we're talking about, and that is women should not be, as you said, we shouldn't have to be thankful for something that we're entitled to. And that's the bottom line.
Interesting perspective. And
One quick thing with equity and equality, they are different. Where I see them being different the most is the work I do with persons with disabilities. And sometimes we have to treat them differently in order for them to be able to have an equal experience. So if someone breaks their arm and they can't take notes and they need a note taker so that they'll be able to study for their class, no, we're not giving all students note takers, so we are treating them differently. But we're treating them differently so that they can get the same experience that everybody else has in being able to take those notes. So they are different, but sometimes it's necessary for them to be different.
Well, I totally agree with that. This is what I do every day. And that's called special accommodations. And yes, they need to be accommodated so that they can live the life just like anybody. Because people are people first,
Yes.
regardless of their disability. It's actually, they have special abilities.
Thank you, Barbara. And
Yeah, just real quick. So equity, the difference between equality in the athletic department means that the athletic department doesn't need to be a mirror image of whatever the men's department is. So if men want to play football and women want to instead have 4 different teams that equals this one team, they can do that. They can have a lacrosse and a soccer and a swimming and a track and field team. The number of athletes is the same as over here, right? So that's equity.
thank you. I want to thank all of you for being here and thank our panelists, of course, Nancy Hogshead-Makar, Barbara Jo Palmer, and Marlon Jones. Thank you so much for your insight. Thank you for what you do every day.
And I'd like to thank Mary Baer here for
yes, thank
moderating
you.
all of us. Thank you very much.